Hello everyone, and welcome back to our book podcast sit down type booktube YouTube video. And today we are going to investigate the intentions of Walt Whitman's unpublished manuscript, I Dreamed in a Dream. As you know, these past few months I've been reading throughout the entire Leaves of Grass editions, starting from the very beginning up until the Deathbed edition, and also been studying biographical information and criticism, and most recently I've been studying the handwritten manuscripts of his, and across the manuscripts, most of them are very messy, almost illegible at times, with crossed out lines and additions, whatnot. And so as I was going through the archive, this specific manuscript of I Dreamed in a Dream really stood out to me because it was overall very neat and legible. I could read everything it said. There's little to no revisions directly on the document, and so it got me thinking, why is this manuscript different? What was the difference behind this for Whitman? And so after conducting my research and gathering all my findings together, analyzing the data, I've come to the conclusion that this manuscript of I Dreamed in a Dream, which was written sometime between 1857 and 1859, it was not originally intended to be published. The manuscript presents this epiphanic moment of adhesive love, which is like a glimpse into Whitman's mind and his desires during this time in his life. So let's get into my findings. So as you see on the manuscript, there are no revisions in black ink, and I think there's only 2 revisions in pencil, which really shows that he wasn't interested in perfecting this, and he had no audience in mind. It truly shows this sort of stream of conscious moment in just writing for himself. Obviously the black pen was written all at one point, and then he went back to it because he crosses out the words the quality of, and then also adds Calamus 34 in the corner in pencil, which just suggests that eventually he did think of this poem in a new way, including it in Leaves of Grass, but originally it was just a stream of conscious moment for him. And another thing that I thought was interesting was that the Whitman Archive biography section explicitly states that Whitman said that until the poem was in print, he did not consider it a poem, which really just further backs up my argument that he had no audience in mind or culturally significant meaning behind this besides a simple diary reflection for himself. He didn't even consider this a poem for anyone yet. And another detail of the manuscript that really stood out to me was the emphasis on the word them compared to the rest of the document. It's this really dark assertive pen strokes. It almost looks like an ink blot compared to the other words, and I feel this is really emphasized, this moment where he just, wrote very boldly, almost as if he's remembering real concrete people. And I think potentially the men at Pfaff's saloon, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I will go into this later in the video. Yeah, this line, I often saw them in numbers, is just incredibly personal, as if he's talking about a past memory, as if he's seeing these people, them, in his mind, and meditating on this adhesive love that he's experiencing in this new season of life. And as well, overall, he just says I over and over again, I think 3 times just in this short stanza, just emphasizing the just him as an individual, what he's experiencing. It's not a poem for America per se, which was his intention as a poet. But in this moment, he wasn't trying to be a poet. He was just being himself. Some other little document quirks that I found also helped my argument were the pinholes at the top of the document, which perplexed me for a while, but now I think is just meant to be this artistic expression. It was like this moment where Whitman was just sitting with himself, maybe just doodling on a bench or looking at papers on his desk and just thinking thoughts, right? And, it was just this epiphanic moment. And then also, he uses a total of 3 em dashes in this pretty short manuscript, which, as we know, like, em dashes signify a pause or even a breath to Whitman. And I think this just overall suggests his presence in writing this. There wasn't any super thought out punctuation. It's just as if he's thinking out loud to himself. There's no greater meaning, just a pause, just a breath between thoughts. As I've briefly mentioned before, I wanted to include some more historical background evidence that backs up my findings. It is extremely important to note that at this time that Whitman wrote the manuscript, he was a regular at Pfaff's Saloon, and this is where he joined the Fred Gray Association, which is defined as a loose confederation of young men who seem to explore the new possibilities of male-male affection. So obviously here, he was inspired to embrace this adhesiveness that he ever so dreams about in this poem. And even further, I would like to say that the city of robust friends that he writes about is the people he met at this association, and just this loving connection that he's found in this community is kind of the epitome of humanity that he really believes in and believes that America can achieve. Also, during this time, very important, he developed a very passionate relationship with Fred Vaughan, whom he met at Pfaff's. They corresponded through letters, obviously had a very intense relationship, but it is interesting because the Whitman archive has letters of Fred's correspondence to Whitman, but they don't have Whitman's correspondence to Fred. But every time that Fred signed off on a letter to Whitman, he would always write "yours truly," something on a similar note. Very romantic, one might say. And a quote I would like to point out was when Whitman left to go to Boston for a time, leaving New York. Fred Vaughan wrote, "Walt, I hope you will be home soon. I want to see you very much indeed. I have never thought more frequently about you during the time you have been in Boston. Yours truly, Fred." So obviously there is some romantic connotation there. He longs for Walt. Although we don't know what Walt was saying to Fred, I like to think that this manuscript that I've been studying is almost a version of a letter to Fred, and where he is meditating on this love and he feels comfortable enough to express these sentiments on paper. Yeah, I think it's very interesting that even though all of his letters to him can't be found, I think the impact of his love still remains, and it remains written if we look deeply enough. Yeah, it's just a surviving concrete piece of writing about the passionate male-on-male intimacy that he probably experienced with him. Fred really is the epitome of the Calamus poems. I think it's very interesting to talk about, but I also do want to address the counter-argument that could go against my argument, is that eventually Walt did indeed publish a version of this poem. So if he wrote it and he eventually published it, then obviously he wanted people to read it, right? But the poem was significantly changed. Even if it's just a few words and lines rearranged, the meaning is different. Whitman really universalizes the poem in a way where like he captures the same feeling of love but in a more safe way for him, where he generalizes the poem and takes out personal aspects. I think only as he's trying to gain more attraction as being the American poet, he decides to transform this adhesive love to a more universal one that encourages everyone to seek out this special feeling. So as we get to the end of this investigation, I just want to highlight the importance of why these findings are so important. And through viewing these early unpublished drafts of published poems, readers really get to understand Whitman's ideas revolving around intrinsic love in society and how it's not just a performance. Like, Whitman deeply cares about these subjects and meditates on these ideas throughout his daily life. Like, it's not just an act. He spends his whole life devoted to understanding and emulating these ideas. And while this poem specifically is framed as a dream, he intentionally uses attainable words that he believes and hopes America can achieve overall, that this love is inside everyone. Everyone has access to these thoughts and feelings and ideas. And I think it's really amazing how we get to witness his own awakening, influencing the awakening of America as a country, or at least attempting to. It really shows this deeper side of Whitman, if you allow it, and how he wasn't just writing for aesthetic purposes alone. That is all I have for us today. I am curious to see what you all think, if you can find more evidence. But yeah, thank you so much for listening, watching, all of the above. All right, bye.